Okay, guys, good morning again. So let us have a continuation of our topic last week. Okay, so let's start. So about the plant adaptation. So same thing with the animals, plants having their own adaptation. So way back to when we go back to animals again, so they have the two types of adaptation, right? So behavioral and structural. So let us also see whether the plants have behavioral and structural. Okay, so before that, let us see first the different classification of plants. So there are different types of plants. So we have the trees, we have the herb, shrub, climbers, and creepers. So those different classification have their own way on how to adapt the habitat or the place where they live. So these are the examples. So for the herb, we have the thyme and basil. So how can we describe thyme and basil? So they are the type of plants which is short size, soft, green, delicate stem without the woody tissue. So when we say woody tissue, they have the branches or trunks. But these herbs, they don't have that. And they just grow shorter compared to the trees that they grow taller. So when we say trees, they have the woody trunks. Okay. So for the shrubs, they are medium-sized woody plants, taller than the herbs and shorter than the tree. So like medium size. So the example that we have in here is blackcurrant and strawberries. So they also form in like a tree, but they are not as tall as those trees that we can see in the forest. And then trees are big and tall plants. They have very thick, woody, and hard stems called trunk. Okay. So for the climbers, have a very thin, long, and weak stem which cannot stand upright, but they can use external support to grow vertically and support or and carry their weight. So sometimes those planters that used to have these climbers, they already prepare what is that? A wood or a stick where the climbers can climb up. So that's why we call it as a climbers because they climb. So they need something to support their body in order for them to grow in a way that they can uh, grow well. And then for the last one, we have the creepers, are plants that creep on the ground and they have a very fragile, they are very fragile, long, thin stems and can neither stand erect nor support all its weight. So meaning the stems of these plants, it is very thin, but then the fruits that grows on these plants is very big. So therefore, these plants cannot carry the fruit. So then they will just creep or they're just laying down in the ground. But then the fruits niya grow in that place also. So those are the different classification of our plants. So as I've said, so those groups of plants have their own way on how to adapt the places where they live or the habitat. So plants adaptation, they also have two types, so behavioral and structural. So they don't have the migration and hibernation. So they are not the same with the animals. So for the behavioral adaptation of the plants, so it helps them to survive in their environment. So when we say behavioral, how it depends on how they move. So we even though they are just plant or live in one place, they can also move. Remember that the plants can follow the direction of the sunlight. So we call that movement as tropism. So it is a movement of a plant toward or away from the stimulus. Toward means positive or away means negative. So let's say, for example, the position of the earth facing towards the sun. So let's say at noontime. So you will see or you will observe that the position of the plants is also upright. Okay? So when the earth is facing, let's say, already at afternoon, done in the noontime, so you will see that the plants also bending the position or following to the direction of the sunlight. So that is the behavioral adaptation of the plant. While for the structural adaptation, it is the part or the organs of the plants that helps them to survive. So what are those plants? What are those parts? So we have the leaves, which is said to be the responsible, or it is responsible for the making of food for the plants. And then the stems, it is one that carries or transport water and minerals to the entire parts of the plants. So both leaves and stems needs to absorb or needs the presence of the sunlight. While the roots, of course, it is the one that anchor the plants to the soil so that it will not fall down. So roots absorbs water and minerals from the soil. So those parts of the plants, it needs to be healthy so that they can live healthy as well. Next, how are plants adapted to their environment? So there are different ways on how they will adapt to the environment. The first one is adaptation for obtaining sunlight, followed by adaptation in water and plants, adaptation for dispersing seeds, adaptation for pollination, and adaptation in desert plants. So when we say adaptation for obtaining sunlight, so we are referring to the parts of the plants that needs the presence of sunlight. So what part of the plants is that? So of course it is the leaf, right? Or the leaves of the plants, including the stem. So they need the presence of the energy coming from the sun so that the stem will become strong. So for the leaf or for the leaves of the plants, they need sunlight or energy coming from the sunlight so that they can able to make food. So food plus oxygen. Oxygen will be needed by the human and animals. For the food, it is the glucose or the starch will be supplied to the entire parts of the plant. And then for the adaptation in water plants, knowing that there are different types of plants that can stay in water. So plants that live in water also need sunlight. They will die if they do not obtain enough sunlight to make food. So same thing with the ordinary plants that you can see on land. They also need sunlight. So if we're going to look into the water that there is a plant there, usually the parts of the plants that we can see on that we can see in the water is just the leaf, right? The leaf of the plants only floating to the water. So later we'll continue about that. Next, for the dispersing seed, there are different ways that the plants can disperse the seed, right? It depends on the types of plant. So let's say, for example, the maple seed, the coconut. So if we compare the two of them, coconut can be dispersed or they can grow with the help of the water only. It cannot be carried by the wind as coconut is heavy. While for the maple or the dandelion seed, they can be dispersed using the wind or with the help of the wind. For the pollination, so there are different ways also on how the plants pollinate. So what are those pollination that we have for the plants? So we have the cross-pollination and self-pollination. So when we say self-pollination, the plants can able to pollinate by themselves without the help of others, of other pollinators. When we say cross-pollinators or cross-pollination, so it needs the help of the insect so that the pollen can travel from one anther of the plants to another plants or going to the stigma of another plants. So that is the pollination, yeah. And then adaptation in desert plants. Not all the animals or sorry, not all the plants can able to stay in the desert. So there are some rare types of plants that can able to stay longer there. So the example that we have is the common example is the cactus. So cactus can stay in the desert. So because it has its own unique way on how they can prolong their life in the desert. So adaptation for obtaining sunlight. So I mentioned already that when we say obtaining sunlight, the main parts that is responsible for the plants to collect sunlight is the leaf of the plants. So why they need the presence of the sunlight? It is because they need it to do the process of photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, what the components that the plants need is carbon dioxide, which is released by the human or even the animals, plus the energy coming from the sunlight and also the water. So that's why the formula for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water, and then is equals to glucose plus oxygen. Okay, so what is the glucose? Glucose will serve as the, so this glucose will serve as the food for the plant. Okay, while the oxygen will be absorbed by the human, we, human and animals. Okay, Miss, where is the energy coming from the sunlight? So maybe that is your question. So the energy coming from the sunlight is in this. So of course, it will be part of the uh, photosynthesis. So the energy, carbon dioxide plus water in a form of light energy or heat energy coming from the sun, it will turn into glucose as the food for the plants and oxygen. So that's why in the process of photosynthesis, there is two products. That is glucose will serve as the food and oxygen as the things or the gas that we need for us to survive. Okay, the next thing. Okay, so this is the leaf of the plants, right? So you will see that there are different parts of the leaf that we have there. So a leaf is the green, flat lateral outgrowth in plants. They are the main organs responsible for photosynthesis as they contain chlorophyll. Okay, so chlorophyll means it is a green pigment or it is the green substance that makes the plants or the leaf of the plants turn
Miss,
green.
Miss,
Yes?
can I charge my phone for a while?
Okay. So what are the parts of the leaf? We have the tip, the edges of the leaf. We have the veins. So you will see there. What is this in the middle part? We call it as a midrib. So the place where the vein is connected, we call it as a midrib. And then this one is the blade, petiole or the stalk, stipule like the a little leaf there, and then the axial, which the one that holds the entire part of the leaf. So leaves come in different shape, size, and colors. So the more the leaf, the bigger the leaf, it will be easy for the leaf to absorb sunlight if the shape or the size of the leaf is quite big. So you'll see the difference, yeah? The different shapes, even the colors. Next. So this is about the adaptation in water plants. So as you can see in the water plants or those plants that you can see in the water, they have smaller roots, they have the flexible stem, and the water go directly to the leaves because they are already there, right? The leaves are touching already with or in the water. So plants that live in water also need sunlight, as I've said a while ago. They have their own adaptive features to enable them to get more sunlight. So there are different types of plants that can live in water. So we have the water hyacinth and water lily. So the difference between the water hyacinth and water lily is that the hyacinth the leaves of the hyacinth are waxy to keep the plant waterproof, while water lily, oh, they also have the same characteristic. It has a waxy leaves, make the plants waterproof as well, allowing water to slide off the leaves easily. This prevents the plants from getting soaked. While for the water hyacinth, it has a spongy leaf. Stalk traps air to enable the plants to stay buoyant, to stay afloat at the top of the water. So that is the characteristic of the plants that stays in water. Sorry. So how about the roots? So it is a continuation of a while ago. I forget, sorry. For the roots, remember that the main organ that the plants needs is also the roots. So there are different types of roots. We have the top roots and fibrous roots. So when we say top roots, uh, have a main central root upon which it is a small lateral root called root hairs are attached. So the examples that we have for the top roots is carrots, while for the fibrous roots, so when we say fibrous, it is branchy. So usually they grow horizontal to find water, while for the top roots, they dig the soil deeper down the ground in order for them to find water as well. So this is the stem. A while ago, we mentioned that when we mentioned the classification of the plants. So there is woody and non-woody, right? So this is the difference between the woody. When we say woody, it has a lot of branches. But when we say non-woody, or we call it as herbaceous stems, so the stems are not that strong compared to the trees. So this one, adaptation for pollination. So when we say pollination, it is the traveling of pollen from the anther to the stigma. So way back to your year 5 class, we discussed already what is pollination. So there are different types of pollination, right? So self-pollination and cross-pollination. So plants have adapted many traits to attract pollinators. So which part of the plants makes the pollinators attract or attracted? So of course, it is the flowers. So the flowers have, some of the flowers are uh, scented, but some of the flowers are not scented or unscented. So some plants are pollinated by birds and bats. So most plants are pollinated by insects. So how does the pollen transfer from one anther to the stigma? It is because of the insect. Usually it's because of the insect. So this one. So you will see in the picture there is a type of insect there. So this insect is attracted maybe to the scent of the flower. So while like smelling or sucking the nectar, the pollen might attach to the body parts of the insect. Then when it travels to another flower, so those pollen that is being attached to the body parts of the insect might transfer to the stigma. So that is pollination. So bright colored blossoms attract bees, flies, butterflies, and moths inside to collect nectar and pollen. Sometimes lines on their petals will guide the insect down into the blossom, or a sweet smell will attract pollinators from a long way off. So plants have sweet smells and bright colors to attract insects. So that's the thing. But if it is dull colors, or the plants are or the color of the petals are like white and not there is no fragrance, so usually it will be uh, wind pollination will be there to help them. So the pollen from that dull, like a dull flower, will help, or the wind will help the pollen to transfer from the other uh, flowers, or it can be transferred in the same flower. So that is the self pollination. So these are the parts again of the flowers. So remember, so way back to your year 5 class, flowers divided into two reproductive system, right? So we have the male and the female. So for the male part, so we have the anther and the filamen, and we call it as the male part, we call it as stamen. But for the female, we have the pistils. So that is the female part. So in the pistils, there are stigma, style, ovary, and ovule. So this flower is responsible for the production of a new plant, as the flower is the one that will produce fruits, and in the fruits there is a seed. Okay, so dispersal will happen to this. Okay, adaptation for dispersing seed. So there are different types of seed dispersal. So we have the uh, animals or human dispersal. We have the bursting. We have the water. Another is what is that? Wind. Okay, so getting its seeds spread is even harder for plants as they are much larger than pollen and need to move away from the parent plant to avoid competing for sunlight and water. So the reason why the plants need to disperse the seed so that it will avoid the overcrowding or to avoid overpopulation in the same area as the plants or as the seed fall in the same area where the parent plants are there. So these little plants cannot grow healthy because they cannot get enough minerals, they cannot get enough sunlight because the parent plant is the one that will get those things. So that's why they need to be dispersed from other places far away from the parent plant so they can grow healthy. Okay, so that is for the uh, adaptation for dispersing seeds. So flowering plants have adaptations to ensure that their seeds are dispersed as far as possible from the parent plant. Having the young plants far away from the parent plants ensures that all plants have enough space, water, light, and minerals to grow well. So that's the reason. So again, if they will be, if the young plants grow beside the parent plant, they will not grow healthy or they will die as they don't have enough minerals or enough sunlight for them to grow, even the water. So let's say the young one will grow. The roots is still small, right? It cannot get enough water because the parent plant is the one that will collect a lot of water. Okay, so how are fruits and seeds dispersed? So by animals, by winds, or self-dispersal. So self-dispersals, it is the bursting or explosion. So by the wind, so we have there the examples as well. So by animals, not just only animals, we can include us as a human. So usually those fruits, sometimes we are the one that we are the tools for them to disperse the seeds. Okay, so this is the seeds. So again, seeds have different types, right? Or parts. So we have the embryo, the young plant. We have the seed coat. It is the one that protects the entire parts of the seed. We have the stored food, which is the one that supply energy and food for the seed. So that is the parts of the seed. So if there is no question about that, so in addition to that lesson, so I think we missed one, which is adaptation in desert plants. So a while ago, I mentioned that there are some plants that can stay in the desert, right? So Jason RC, I think it's not time for you to play this time, okay? So for the adaptation in desert plants, so the example that we mentioned is what? The cactus, right? So how does this cactus able to stay in the desert is because of their structure. So usually cactus have a long root and then they can store the water in their body so that they can stay longer in the desert. So although the cactus doesn't have leaves for them to make food, but there is a stem. So the stem is the one that will do the production of food or will do the photosynthesis for them to produce food. Okay, so that is for adaptation in desert plants. So again, additional topic, how are different organisms suited to their habitat. So we have in our book, you can open your book on page 128 to 129. So the habitat given there is the pond habitat. So this pond habitat is just common or ordinary habitat that we can see anywhere.
What
So it
page,
is
miss?
page 128. It is a small type of water form that you can see, let's say, at the back of the uh, at at the back of your house. If there is a pond there, a small pond, that there is a small, also a small types of trees or small plants that you can see there. And then some of the organisms or additional organisms that you can see there are the insect, frog, or even small fishes. Okay, the pond is a small area of still water that is usually shallow. Okay, so it's small only. While the other one is green habitat. So green habitat, like it is a domestic place where where there are different, or where you can see different types of trees as well, but not the forest one. It's more smaller than the forest. So those small type of insects also are can be seen on that area. Okay. So is there any question now? If you don't have any question, so I want you to open your workbook, guys. So get your workbook first. Okay, so take your workbook and answer pages 97 to 102 of your workbook. Page 100, page 97 to 102. Okay, page 97 to 102. The submission of that the submission of this activity or classwork will be in our Teams. So of course, same procedure, take a photo of your answer and send it to Teams. Go to your folder, attach your answer there. Okay, find your own folder and attach your answer. Okay, okay guys. So a short reminder about your class test. It will be on 19, yeah, October 19, Monday. So review. So it's just a chapter 6 of our book, Food Chain and Adaptation. Okay, Food Chain and Adaptation. Review that topic. That is the part of our class test. Okay, so again, for those who are done, go to Teams, open the files, find your folder, and attach your work. Okay. So, any question about the two topics, adaptation and food chain? So, I'm hoping that all of you will pass this coming, this class test, yeah, coming class test. Thank you for today. So, we'll be waiting for your next teacher. Who's your next teacher?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
Miss, when do we pass this?
Miss, today, of course. You
Miss
still have
Megan,
6 minutes. You still have 6 minutes to submit your work.
Miss
Who's your
Megan,
next?
is it okay if we get late a little, Miss?
Why?
No, Miss. I'm still doing this.
Okay. So who is your next teacher, by the way? Oh, history. Yeah. Is it history?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So again, thank you for today. So I hope everything is clear about food chain and adaptation.